the Protestant tradition somehow accepted it, reconciled with it, became a party. Yes, I very much value the new liberal theology, where I think a reassertion of the original Christian message of justice and some of the statements of the Pope. But overall, during that 1 century of secularism, this is not a fact that Christian leadership accepted secularism as part of the overall paradigm which they promoted and shared.
I hope the chair will 20 minutes to respond to those two questions. I'll be brief, and I can't even. Roger's opposition to about the history, I think, is rather odd, really. I have no problem about making judgments about the history, and I make judgments about the history all the time. I quite understand there's a danger of anachronism. You know, you're just making judgments in history in hindsight. But people make just in the past, and with hindsight we can see they were mistaken, and what they believed about the world was wrong, and all sorts of things happened. So I don't quite understand his aversion to it's just in principle illegitimate to do that. The second part of the question is that there was universal support by the church. That just isn't true. There were, and as you would imagine, every age has its dissenters, and there were dissenting, especially amongst Reformed Protestant groups in England who were opposed to colonialisation and what it implied. So there is always diversity in any period, in any time, and of course those voices were right, and that's what I mean when I say that I think the act of colonialism was a betrayal of the Christian tradition. The question about Christian leadership has capitulated to secularism in the West is a very interesting one, and one I would like to, if I spend much longer on. And again, if I can just indulge and refer you to my latest offering to the world, which nobody will read, because nobody reads academic books. Sorry, I sound all persecuted and aggrieved. So please go out and buy a copy and ensure I have a good vacation this year. A Theology of Engagement, published recently by Blackwell. I'll donate a copy to this library, if you like. In that, I try to illustrate that Christian theology, at its best, methodologically, always been learning from others. So Augustine of Hippo, you know, for all his outrageous conclusions in places, he took seriously Plotinus and Neoplatonism, Manichaeism. He took seriously the visions of the common good of his day and learned from them. Theology needs to be done in conversation. So Thomas Aquinas learned about Aristotle from Islamic thinkers, Al-Ghazali amongst others, to shape his worldview, the Summa Theologica, which was then pivotal of Christian theology in the next 400 years. And good Christian theology needs to be done in conversation. And we need to recognize that all truth, wherever it is part of God's truth. And we can learn from God and God's relations with the world from those who disagree with us. And at the table, in that conversation, should not simply be people of faith, but it should include the Marxists, the secularists, the feminists, and we should listen carefully to their worldview and allow ourselves to be shaped by it. And I don't think, in advocating that, I'm betraying the Christian tradition. I'm not capitulating to secularism at all. I'm simply doing what the Christian tradition has always done. Christian theology should be done in conversation with others. It always was the case, and it should always be the case.
Colonel Tressler, please.
I'd just like to comment too. In my retirement years, I've been writing a book on the history of a particular congregation in the United States that was gathered and founded in 1705. And as part of my research, I've been reading letters on the archives of the church. And many of these have to do with missionaries and the responses from missionaries and the appeal to missionaries from the local congregation. Christian missionaries are responding to the commission of Jesus in the 28th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, where he says, "Go unto all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit." So there's that commission that's been understood as one to go out and to preach and to share what Christians believe is the good news of the gospel. That was a genuine impulse. As we read back into history now, we see it as a negative, obviously. But at the time, back in the 19th century, as I read these letters, it was a time of excitement, and there was a strong belief that these people were doing enormous good. It may be that they were misguided, but certainly I can't fault the sincerity with which these people went out. They often went out and lost their lives very quickly to illness and disease. And certainly it was not very often a rewarding kind of, materially rewarding kind of enterprise. But they went out seeking to benefit humanity, and not to put it down.
Karan Sahib.
Short comment. There's been talk about the missionary work. I think all the religions have spread through missionaries. The light, God. And similarly, some of my good friends Muslims are there because of the work of the scholars who came, the ulama. Christians in the subcontinent are converts from Hindus, they are converts from Brahmins, they are converts from Muslims, they are converts from Sikhs, and they are converts from unbelievers. My family has the succession tree from the Hindus, the Hindu Brahmins, the Sikhs, and the Muslims. And Muslims also from the frontier where very few Muslims got converted. I am a good Christian. I have spent my entire life with my Muslim friends. There is an understanding to be developed. I think the two closest religions in this world today are Islam and Christianity. But we have to develop the correct understanding between them and create the misunderstandings which have been created by even some of the scholars. I have lived up and I had no problems. I fought wars with myself being the only commander who was a Christian and with my Muslim troops, and nobody had any questions. Now we have to develop the understanding. My friends say that you are half Muslim. I say no. I am 90% practicing Muslim and 100% Christian. Because all the prophets who came, they came to fulfill the work of the earlier prophet. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that I have come to complete the work, and the high esteem in which the Muslims hold Jesus Christ, I think some of the Christian world does not hold that. So we got to forget about the past and concentrate on today as to what we should do to remove the misunderstanding. The crusade time is gone. President Bush uttered that word only once, and our media was so good that they talked on it, and it was known to every Muslim in the world. There is no crusade today. We are living as neighbors. We are living as good friends, and we got to develop that. Unfortunately, the crisis is that the targets, wherever there is trouble, the areas and the countries are inhabited by Muslims. And the perpetrator is termed as a Christian. The Americans, I think, are doing no good service to Christianity. They are not real Christians, as has been pointed out by my friend. And another thing is that the fastest spreading religion in the United States is Islam. There is no denying the fact, and I would like to have comments on that from there. Thank you.
Comment, would you just repeat the
Fastest growing religions, Islam.
what? The fastest growing religion is Islam today. I'm not sure that's true. I think in Africa and in the United States, it certainly is the fastest growing religion. That's right. That's right, and that's good. I mean, Islam has much to contribute to the world.
I would like to mention one very good thing of one of our late presidents, Jawahar. He used to say that don't leave your own belief and don't touch on the belief of the other. That was his saying, although a lot of people blame him that he has brought in all problems in Pakistan about Islam, but I considered him a real and believe and don't leave your own. Thank you.
Philosophy presented in your was non-retaliation and forgiveness in Christianity. And you also mentioned Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King had a quality of ethnic groups. And in one of his speeches, he said, when Jesus Christ said, if somebody hits you on one cheek, you offer him the other one. He wasn't speaking of the black cheek. Today we refer to this point as that he was not speaking of the Muslim cheek. Also, the history of American, as has been said, has changed since 9/11. If you go into the history of 400 years, which starts with annihilation of the Aboriginal Red Indians, and then the forced transportation and exploitation of the Central and Northern Africans, and then in the Second World War, a weapon of mass destruction was dropped in Japan, not in one but two cities, or was it a friendly fire? And now it's the Muslim chapter. One needs to find out whether it is all happening accidentally. You say that whatever happened in the 19th century, in hindsight, was an incorrect decision. Maybe what is happening today would be incorrect decision in the hindsight of the next 100 years.
I agree with that. I certainly do. I applaud what you just said.
I think maybe most of us might be looking at the watch anyway. I think I'll go back to some of the things, comments which came from here and was there. And I am looking at some words from the document National Security Strategy of the United States of America, which is the basis of all that we are witnessing today, which says categorically that today the United States enjoys a position of unparalleled military strength and great economic and political influence. And basically it goes on to say that that is something that we essentially shall protect. And I think another trend of thought which I witnessed therein is that the rewards of challenges of political and economic liberty should accrue to those who at the moment are denied those. And shadowy networks of individuals can bring great chaos and suffering to our shores, penetrate open societies, and turn the power of modern technologies against us. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is this, that essentially it would appear that it is the position of power, privilege and strength which is being tried to be preserved. Now, at the same time, if the position is taken that its legitimacy and also I think its political will is emanating from a very strong underlying support from the religious right. And I would say actually from the common man there is. You talk to a mason, you talk to a carpenter, you talk to a driver, and you will possibly hear not the logic and not the reasoning for what is being done, but I think a great degree of empathy and understanding Not only that, I think not even empathy and understanding. I think acceptance of the objectives. So, to me, it appears that whatever may be the intellectual positions that may be taken by the global Christian community or theological positions taken by the global Christian community on the subject, the fact is that possibly it will, the beneficiaries of this whole scheme of things emerging after in the post 9/11 world are intended for preservation of that position of strength and hegemony, and maybe further it. So the resistance, if at all, has really to come to this. If it is not the path of righteousness, then the resistance has to come from within the Christian community more than from anybody else. That's my observation.
Was there a question in that? It was a comment.
We've got to resist.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. In terms of Christian response to the policies of the United States today, I think there needs to be, and there is, resistance in the part of many within the Christian community.
The last and the most believed question, please. The last and the most believed question.
My question was regarding the liberalism, but the discussion. In past, I'm more confused with the discussion. In past, we were living in crusades, and when crusades were happening in the West or in the Middle East, we Christians in Asia were confronting or having a religious debate with the Muslims, Hindus. Now, the West is speaking of liberalism. They are more concerned with the social issues than the religious issues. Dr. Ian, when you said that excluding God from public squares, you oppose this, but I think gradually, well, being a distant learner, I understand that gradually we are excluding God from the public squares, and we are more concerned with the social issues than the religious ones. And church and clergy are more relating themselves with the social issues than the religious ones. We Christians living in Islamic context, in an Islamic country, are more considered with this thing because we have to answer the questions why Christians eat pork like this. So I would like to have a comment that why we always have to follow the West, whereas we claim that West is not Christian.
I think it was a Christian mystic who said that until you're at peace within your own soul, you cannot bring peace to others. So you're absolutely right. The Christian formation begins with the individual, and for Christians, that's to know and to absorb the gospel and the teachings of Jesus. And it's to form communities of worship and caring. And out of the strength that comes from community, people, men and women gathering together to read and understand and to worship the gospel message, to appreciate, to absorb the gospel message, comes the impulse then to go out and to work for the betterment of others and to oppose the kinds of evils that exist in our world. But initially, of course, it is within Christian communities that the individual is nurtured in the faith and life of the Christian community.
I must express my appreciation and gratitude for the two learned speakers whose presentations have created a lot of interest, although it is difficult to say, at least for me, whether it was the beauty of presentation or the burning nature of the subject or the nature and dimensions of the discussion which invited this much attention by the participants. In fact, we are short of time. The last part of the session is the two presentations made by Dr. Zafar Ishaq Ansari and Dr. Anis Ahmed. we propose that the two gentlemen make their presentation now briefly, and the discussion will follow in the next session. We will rise up for Zohar prayer and lunch exactly sharp at 1:30, and during this period the two gentlemen will make their presentations. We should start from the right side, if Dr. Anis allows, Dr. Ansari first, and then to be followed. This was the sequence. Okay, I'm sorry, Dr. Anis. I thought the principle of Tayamun will work. अच्छा है.
My task is very difficult because we have reached a point in our patience where most of the participants perhaps are feeling a bit fatigued and they need some resource energy to become more active. But anyhow, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I don't read usually, but this time I thought to confine myself to time, I must put down my ideas. Forgive me for that. Quest for peace and justice is perhaps a core issue and a major shared aspiration in most of the world religions. However, a more realistic analysis will show that even for the secularist thinkers, peace has been a major concern, though the motivating force behind it may be totally different. The post-capitalist mindset, with its deep commitment to economic development, individualism, and ethical relativism, gradually developed a belief that war cannot help in the long run in achieving the social targets of the industrialized world. Pacifism, in due course, as an individual commitment to non-violence, was projected further and extended to other areas of concern. The strategic use of armed conflicts and wars, directly related with the capitalist urge to control sources of raw material and to create markets for its products, was reconsidered. A new strategic thinking put forward the thesis that peace and pacifism can also pave the way for free trade movement and help the capitalist powers in achieving their objectives, for which conventionally bloody wars were waged. In the post-World War era, a functional approach of trade, travel, and democracy was considered as basis for internationalism. In an era of search for peace, efforts were made to avoid physical wars, considered enemy of free trade and travel. The age of Cold Wars offered new opportunities for development of regional economies, mutual understanding, and nuclear deterrence. Emergence of the institution of United Nations theoretically was a materialization of pacifism at a global international level. Leaving aside the success or failure of this international body, its major role was supposed to be facilitation of peaceful resolution of conflicts. Peacemaking and peacekeeping became an article of faith for this proud secular institution and its member states. Peace movement and non-violent resistance movements at historical level include not only democratic struggle for the liberation of people from the exploitation of and oppression of imperialist and colonialist powers of the Europe, it also included movements such as the one for gender equality. Though women's liberation movement in the West called for equal rights for women and not an equitable role for them, it did not become violent and remained a peaceful movement. At the political front, movements for democratization of society sometimes remained peaceful, while at others turned out violent. Nevertheless, global movements for peace or resolution of conflicts without use of military power, with their basic secular character, kept working for creation of a better human environment. The Helsinki process of the movement for a nuclear-free world is an example of this secularist concern for peace. Persons with declared religious affiliation, on the other hand, have been often blamed for instigating extremism, fundamentalism, violence, terrorism, and bloodshed. For several decades, Catholics and Protestants in the Northern Ireland were blamed
for religious violence, fundamentalism and extremism. The fact, however, remains neither Catholicism nor Protestantism endorse such violence and bloodshed. Similarly, the ethnic cleansing of Croats by Croats and Serbs and the terror against the Bosnian Muslims should not be generalized as an act inspired by Christianity. Similarly, conscientious, honest, and ethically committed Jews never support the naked violence and brutality committed by Zionists against the indigenous Muslims and Christians in Palestine. The refusal of a number of Israeli pilots to target Palestinian townships shows that not all Jews support Zionist terrorism in Palestine. This shows that peace enjoys enormous importance among the secularists as well as among religious persons, and violence cannot be justified in the name of religion. Peace initiatives and peace process are generally associated with peaceful settlement of disputes, concern for collective security, disarmament, preventive diplomacy, and functionalism. Disputes and disagreements, whether political, economic, or ideological, have been generally settled either through use of might and power or through negotiations, that is brain power, mediation, face-to-face interaction, and dialogue. Peace initiatives provide a forum for this purpose. Concern for collective security generally leads to bilateral and multilateral relations which further lead to regional or global peace process. Whilst armament refers to particularly efforts to check arms disbalance and containment of nuclear weapons, proper disposal of nuclear waste, and voluntarily avoiding an arms race are inalienable dimensions of that. It also prepares the ground for a better future for peace in the world. Preventive diplomacy through direct involvement of agencies such as UN also offers a viable option for peace. Though unilateralism of the US imperialism in its invasion and unlawful occupation of Iraq has seriously dented this role of the UN, perhaps a phenomenological approach in which intellectuals, religious leaders, and those involved in policy planning, though through their collaborations on current international economic, social, and political issues, can create a better environment for an ongoing dialogue, mutual confidence building, and development of a non-violent global peace. Where do the living religions stand in this contemporary discourse on peace? More specifically, how Islam looks on peace calls for rather dispassionate search for the meaning and relevance of peace in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. Etymologically, the term Islam draws its origin from the Arabic root SLM, which literally means peace and acceptance of servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or surrender to Him, to His authority as the ultimate. If this is so, why a global uproar about the so-called bloody doctrine of holy war or Islamic jihad? It may sound naive, nevertheless, a major cause for this misconception is the fictional image created by electronic media and journalistic writings of a group of Orientalists, neocon intellectuals, and freelance lobbyists to take being a correspondent of New York Times without having lived much in Middle East and with no working knowledge of Arabic, she writes authoritatively on Islam. Edward Said, while reviewing her book, says, "What matters to experts like Miller, Sam Huntington, Martin Kramer, Bernard Lewis, Daniel Pipes, Stephen Emerson, and Barry Rubin, plus a whole battery of Israeli academics, is to make sure that the threat is kept before our eyes. The battle to exorbitate Islam for terror, disposition, and violence, while assuring themselves profitable consultancies, frequent TV appearances, and book contracts." Unquote. Similar effort is made in Stephen Schwartz's The Two Faces of Islam, The House of Saud from Tradition to Terror. It's a search for demons and a call to slay dragons which only exist in the fantasy of the author. One apparent reason for such projection of Islam, perhaps, as mentioned above, is projection of jihad as a weapon for elimination and destruction of all non-Muslims and their civilization. The tragic event of 9/11 rather reinforced this centuries-old misgiving about Islam as a violent faith. Muslim responses, thanks to being apologetic or reactionary, neither helped in capturing the real meaning and purpose of jihad, nor could be useful in dispelling these allegations. Consequently, misreading the intent, purpose, and method of jihad easily leads one to equate it with violence. Violence is generally defined as purposeful use of force in order to hurt, insult, or injure someone. This is why a remote control device, when used to hurt or kill anyone, is regarded an act of violence and terror. However, we always differentiate between physical injury with an intention to cause pain or harm and same action with an intention to improve, repair, and make life better for a person, such as the use of surgical tools by a dentist in extracting tooth, or the use of knife by a surgeon to save patient's life. It is in this context that jihad in the Quran is projected as an instrument for realization of peace and justice in society, and at the same time a tool for checking the elimination of lawlessness, oppression, and exploitation. Those who choose an apologetic course of argument often draw a line between the so-called defensive and offensive dimensions of jihad. They make frequent reference to a later classification of the word as Darul Harb, Darul Islam, and so on. They go on to the extent of saying that jihad, being essentially defensive, does not permit to go to war against anyone, while some Muslims talk about jihad as a total war against whatever they consider un-Islamic. While both interpretations may contain elements of truth, neither one comprehends the concept in its totality. If we look directly into the Quran as the ultimate source of Islamic teachings, we find the term jihad is used in around 40 places in the Quran, while the term qital appears around 167 times in one other context. While jihad in its Quranic sense refers to a struggle, concerted effort, and ongoing endeavor in order to achieve an objective, the term qital simply means fighting or war in its wider connotation. The purpose and intent of jihad as defined by the Quran is to liberate people from oppression, injustice, exploitation, slavery, and bondage, or restoration of human rights of a people. Although the focus in several places is on the Muslims, it is not correct to confine it to restoration of human rights of Muslims only, for the simple reason that the Quran uses the word mustadafin, or those who are ill-treated and oppressed.